Oh my god, a lot of people explain attack completely crazy. If you even read Brainworx manual to their channel strips, they say short attack gives more punch. It's nonsense. How to understand attack properly, and I'm gonna give you the most important, the most useful, a guideline when to choose short attack and when to choose long attack. By the way, guys, the videos on this channel is just light entertaining add-on to one of the most powerful audio production and mixing courses. According to my policy, I share only 10% of my lessons for free. 10% is still crazy useful, but just imagine what you can get from 100% lessons. How to buy the full lessons and how the system works, read in the description or in the first pinned comment. Before I'm gonna give you the guide how to really choose attack in many different situations, and it will be the most valuable part, I'm gonna show you visually what attack does. Let's say your ratio on your compressor is 4:1, which means it's supposed to be like noticeably working, but within 30 milliseconds, ratio still doesn't reach this maximum application. Ratio is very low at this moment and applying very little compression. The second peak will be compressed, which means lower down in volume, by 1 dB. Remember, you want to compress by 6 dB, right? You don't compress by 6 dB, you still compress only by 1 dB. The third peak will be compressed by 5 dB. You know, like coming to real amount of decibels you would apply, you know. You want to apply 6 dB of compression. By the way, tell me in the comment section how do you like my vintage tube saturating graphic editor called Paint. Starting from peak 4, there will be 6 dB of compression. So in fact it works like this. Your first peak will be compressed by 0.1 dB, which means almost no compression, it's just completely original. Second peak will be compressed by 1 dB. You should understand this, it's all about perceived volume. If you plan to have 6 dB of compression, majority of peaks of your node will be compressed by 6 dB. If some peak in the beginning of a node compressed only by 1 dB, for you it sounds it's almost uncompressed. That's why first incorrect explanation over there makes sense, like you imagine like you don't touch first 3 peaks at all. Even though second peak is touched by 1 dB in comparison to overall 6 dB of compression for the whole node, it's pretty nothing. So that's why you still kind of don't compress it almost. Let's be honest, you already have a couple of pieces of your node, those beginning spikes, uncompressed. So it will be enough eventually to exaggerate overall volume and to have this clicky punch in the beginning. Now I'm gonna give you absolutely phenomenal guide how to choose long attack, short attack, pros and cons of long attack versus short attack. So I'm gonna explain why exactly it's from 10 to 30 milliseconds. And additional rule, don't go more than 50 milliseconds. Let me explain this first, and then I'm gonna give you most important pros and cons and guide how to use long attack and short attack. As you understand, each node is basically timing. It's a specific time. For example, if you look at this kick drum, this kick's length roughly up to 100 milliseconds. Actually, those like last fluctuations almost inaudible in the mix, which means by ears for you this kick drum sounds even shorter, maybe like 80, maybe 70 milliseconds. If you take something longer, let's say, I like to use imperfect projects because it's only way how you really can make sure you improve something or you have some cons and distortion and dirt coming from your processing. If you just polish a gold bar, it always sounds good, you make a lot of mistakes, but you don't even know about those. So this project is quite good because it sounds dirty, and if you do something wrong, it instantly demonstrates it. So this project has this low quality recording made by Telefunken company. It's from Telefunken website.
Treating people just like pawns and shares.
I'm curious, do you know the original band who performed this song? Because it's a cover from other band. Do you know the name of the band? He performs like medium length notes, not too long but not too short. And these notes
Treating people just like pawns and shares.
go from 150 milliseconds to maximum like 400 milliseconds. Now imagine this, let's say this is your kick, 80 milliseconds, right? And vocal, for example, has medium volume note 200 milliseconds, quiet note 200 milliseconds, loud note 200 milliseconds. Now I'm gonna show you why using long attack more than 50 milliseconds makes no sense at all. There are just a couple of tricks actually when you can use very long attack. It's more like tricks. The previous lesson number 9, is amazing, where I explained mistakes of L. Schmidt, who claim compressor should never be used. Over there I explained 2 main reasons why you apply a compressor. So it's to rebalance transient and sustain, and to even out notes together. If you imagine in the first case, your let's say long attack, let's say 60-70 milliseconds, this kick sounds like, in a mix it sounds like inaudible. You want more punch. I disengage SSL compressor and EQ from this kick. Listen to how unclear this kick drum sounds. Sometimes you hear it, sometimes not, especially when it sounds at the same time with the bass. Kick drum sounds, instead of like kick, 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 it sounds more like The point, what you do, you need to improve this transient, the beginning of each punch. For this you use quite short time, up to 30 milliseconds only. You don't compress over here too much, and only after 30 milliseconds you squash the tail. Then what you do, you compensate lost volume, because kick drum will be pretty quiet after compression, and you just normalize it, and this clicky transient in the beginning of a kick will be exaggerated, and kick will sound nice. It will sound like kick, kick, kick. Now imagine instead of 30 milliseconds you apply more than 50 milliseconds, as I said not to use. Let's say you apply 60 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, whatever. It means during attack period of time, peaks will be gradually, slowly getting under compression, which means first peak still no compression, second peak still no compression, just maybe little tiny bit, almost inaudible. Third peak, yes, will have more compression finally, and last peak will be finally compressed after attack period of time. You want kick. Before it was egg, and now it becomes still egg, just like gradually going down in volume, like fading out, more like egg, egg. But you need kick, kick. You know what I mean? That's why no point to use super long attack over here. Transient usually lasts from 5 milliseconds to like 20-30 milliseconds maximum, and this is the amount of time you need to apply. The same going on, let's say, with completely other application. For example, if you want to even out the vocal. Let's say your vocal, medium note, quiet note, loud note. Let's say, give me a sec, I'm gonna explain what attack to use for the vocal, but for now, let's say you use 5 milliseconds, let's say. And now, compressor is supposed to do what? These peaks noticeably above the threshold, so it compresses medium. These peaks almost all under the threshold, so it almost doesn't touch this note at all. And this note, all these peaks too much above the threshold, so compressor will be very compressing the third note, compressing a lot, like this. Now all 3 notes sound almost at the same level, so vocal compressed. Vocal has more evened out notes, so vocal will sit in the mix much better. And to do it, you need to start compressing almost immediately after note appears. If you're gonna apply crazy long attack on your compressor, for example, 60 milliseconds. Remember, notes 200 milliseconds each over here, like medium notes performance, like I showed you in the project. Let's say you apply 60 or 100 milliseconds attack. It means very first peak, even though it's supposed to be compressed with a medium amount like this, it will not be compressed at all. Second peak will be compressed with some amount, but almost inaudible. If the overall amount of compression you plan to have will be like 5-6, this peak will be compressed maybe by 1 dB. So it's almost inaudible compression. And noticeable compression will start to be visible only on the last peak, which is outside of the attack range, like over here. Did you make like half of a note at least controlled dynamically? Compressor still didn't do too much over here at all. So these notes remains at the same level. You controlled only very tail of this note. Okay, let's say compressor doesn't play with this note too much because peak's not above the threshold. Third note. Again, this is 100 milliseconds of 200 milliseconds length note. Now, first peak will be absolutely uncontrolled. Second peak, almost absolutely uncontrolled. Third peak finally gets some compression, and then compression supposed to be more like working, or at least trying to work on the tail, maybe with some amount of release, like this. Now, this is the result on the screen, which you can see, of the compressor with long attack. You absolutely didn't even out any notes. First note still medium volume, second note still quiet volume, and third note still too loud volume. The very first reason why you would apply compressors ever to even out notes is absolutely not implemented. You absolutely didn't achieve anything by super long attack on your compressor. Again, if you want to argue with me, argue with all known compressors. Let me show you. If you don't believe me, believe in known compressors. For example, if you use one of the most known vocal compressors of all time, 1176, which I have over there, two things. We have attack time is variable from position 1 to position 7. Position 7 is almost instantaneous attack. It's 0.0 something milliseconds, you know. And all the way to the left side in position 1, attack is the slowest on this compressor. And it doesn't go more than even 1 millisecond. According to the manual, it's only 0.8 milliseconds. So this compressor, one of the most known vocal compressors of all time, exactly for evening out purposes, right? There is no talk about even 30 milliseconds over here. There is not even 1 millisecond over here. The longest this compressor can have, 0.8. Of course, according to tolerance, this compressor can have roughly around 1 millisecond, but this compressor, of course, doesn't allow you to set up 60 milliseconds. Another known vocal compressor, the most known one, basically, like people say, due to Frank Sinatra and guys like this, it's the compressor on the top over there. This compressor, according to the manual, has 10 milliseconds attack. In the 1950s, they had a manual with a typo, actually. They said microseconds over there. Actually, in fact, it's milliseconds. So this compressor has 10 milliseconds attack, but its release is so long, and there is 2 stages of release, that release never stops, which means every new node will not have like pure new 10 milliseconds attack. So compressor like going on in the beginning of any node on this compressor. But even technically speaking, it has 10 milliseconds. And I say not to use more than 30. So like never use like 50 milliseconds and above, right? Still makes sense. Fairchild, right? This compressor has crazy short attack. Roughly speaking, in different modes of time constant, which controls mostly release. It changes attack a bit. And again, we're talking about less than 1 millisecond time. It's the Beatles band vocal compressor. You can say, but you're talking about vocal, how about drums and stuff like this? All classic drum compressors pretty never have longer than 30 milliseconds attack. Examples: SSL 4000, G and E, they have pretty similar dynamics anyway, even there is micro differences. So this fast button changes from roughly 1 millisecond, 3 millisecond attack in the fast mode. In the slow mode, it's automatic, but maximum 30 milliseconds. So up to 30 milliseconds only. SSL master bus compressor, maximum 30 milliseconds. Empirical up distressor, attack in position 10, which gives you maximum attack, 30 milliseconds. Shadow Hills master bus compressor, longest attack is 30 milliseconds. The question is, do you agree with me that even classic compressors indicates this rule? Put the answer in the comment section. Let me give you a guideline when to use long attack. So it's not just pros, it's when to apply it, it's a guideline. First of all is transient boost, drum punch. As I already showed you how drums become punchy. Some guys simply don't know what punch is, for example Brainworx company. This is the known plugin and this is its manual. This is how the company explain attack parameters. So switcher 4, you go here on the right side and it says switcher 4 F fast attack. Switches between auto and fast attack. Using the fast attack with less gain reduction can give you an interesting alternative sound which will be punchier and more aggressive. It's complete nonsense. I'm gonna show you this example based on just this kick. For now, kick sounds like and I need punchy sound. Punch, if you're a boxer like me, you know that if you just push a heavy bag, it's no punch, it's too soft. You need to throw your hand, like a bullet. So you throw your hand and it's going to the heavy bag so quickly, or to the face. So it's just like click, so it's so clicky, it's almost like gunshot, this is what give you the punch. And this punch, it's higher frequencies, upper mid-range frequency, 2K, from 1K to 3K, those like fluctuations, clickier parts of the sound. So high frequencies in the beginning of a kick, then main body, low frequencies. You need to use long attack, you put the threshold down, you put long attack 30 milliseconds on this compressor. It's an automatic attack on this compressor, but its maximum value is 30 milliseconds. It's definitely longer than short attack, obviously, option. This company suggests you to use short attack for the punch. You need to apply long attack, of course. You mostly don't compress the transient, you compress the tail to soft low frequencies, then you compensate lost volume and you get this clicky punchy gunshot sound. If you use short attack on drums, you use very short attack like this. It's roughly just 1 millisecond or something on SSL, which means transient definitely gonna be compressed from the beginning. Especially if your release time maybe is not the shortest or something, even medium, eventually it will be soft sounding kick like this. If your release time at the same time will be shortest 100 milliseconds, eventually it will lead to situation that some tail actually will be exaggerated after volume normalization. So instead of punchy clicky punch, you're gonna have rather soft beginning and even more low end in the tail. Instead of it will be sounding more like ooh, ooh, where the punch is over here, aggressive sound, they say. What they mix up is coloration, because on SSL compressors, actually, whenever you use fast attack mode, you usually oversaturate your signal. So let's say this is 4-to-1, shortest release. Now I compress, as you can see, by 10 dB. Kick drum in the mix definitely sounds quieter. I normalize volume. This is punchy sound. It's like a pillow. You sleep on this thing, it's a pillow. It's like fee, 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 fee. It's not punch at all. Aggressive sound. Yes, it has much more highs. It's saturated much more. Maybe this is what they mean aggressive sound, but it's not aggressive at all. You want punch? I'm gonna show you how to do it. Go slow attack instead. Now, even with the same amount of compression, I reorganize threshold, because with the slow attack it requires different threshold level to achieve 10 dB. It's even like this already much punchier. I'm gonna even make it more honest. I'm gonna compensate volume a bit differently to make it like how it was before. But now it's like punch, punch, punch. Kick, 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 kick. This is punchier sound, So you obviously should use slow attack to get punch on drums. And don't mix up. Shorter attack can exaggerate your tail, more noise, more harmonics, and it can be clearer in the mix or brighter. It's not punch, it's more saturation. So, the reasons to apply short attack. Let me tell you. First reason, to even out notes. The main reason why you would apply compressor, to control dynamics, which means volume difference between element to element, from node to node. The problem is, when I was learning audio production 25 years ago by books, articles, like video tutorials and stuff, I noticed at least half of demonstrators always use too long attack on vocals. Like 30, 50 milliseconds on vocals. And I was always confused with this, because after it I started digging serious audio engineers like Andy Wallace, Chris Rodelgi, Randy Staub, Tony Maserati, and all those guys actually use very, very short attack on their compressors. Their compressors literally don't even allow you to use too long attack on the vocals. For example, compressor which Chris Rodelgi uses is 1176. As I said, its attack less than 1 millisecond. And all those books written by random guys, in those tutorials people said like 30, 50. And Chris Rodelgi uses literally 0.5 milliseconds, because he uses a bit more than medium on attack parameter. So on 1176 revision A is literally something like around 0.5, 0. Maybe maximum 0.6 millisecond. And I was completely confused why it's so big difference. And when I was practicing and mixing like 20 years ago, I also noticed my vocal like all the time outside of the mix. Suddenly vocal sounds too loosey, too random, jumping out here, drowning there, so it somehow doesn't sit in the mix properly, And of course I try to correct it with automation, which makes a lot of sense, but when I started using short attack, vocals instantly sits in the mix properly, Sound just right. Andy Wallace nowadays uses SSL 9000 console, 9000 channel strip. I was an official tester for the first generation of these plugins for SSL company actually. I have the same compressor on this table. The point of this compressor, even if you decide not to use fast attack on the vocal track, it would be automatic attack up to 30 milliseconds. So it will not raise up attack to those crazy long numbers which those books and articles suggested 20 years ago, you know what I mean? Obviously, if you go with fast attack, it gives you this classic roughly 1, 2, 3 milliseconds attack time for the vocal, so vocal sounds much more under control. Tony Maserati, for example, is a big fan of this compressor, which is Abbey Road classic TG style compressor, which always has originally 1 millisecond attack on it. I'm gonna tell you honestly, guys, the problem with all these tutorials, again, as I always said, they show you a gold bar and they show you how to polish the gold bar, and all their settings makes no sense. Because you can make a mistake, still sounds good, you don't make a mistake, still sounds good. That's why I always work with a bad sounding projects which have issues like uneven dynamics, unclear transients and everything, where I really can improve the sound. Eventually I realized why in those tutorials they can use long attack and it still sounds fine. Because I specifically started paying attention how that vocal sounds even before compression. And those vocals either were already compressed, because in professional field, let's say when Andy Wallace shows you some tutorial, the stems which come into his studio can be already pre-processed. A lot of people, for example, during recording and stuff, they already throw a bit of compression in their vocals. It can be this traditional technique when you apply some LA to A during tracking or CL1B, and those vocals already may sound pretty evened out. And then imagine some Joe Doe throw some plugin on this vocal which already sounds good, already even, colorful and everything, recorded in the perfect studio and stuff, and then they play full, they demonstrate you a compressor with a long attack, and vocal still sounds good, and you think maybe it's correct settings to apply on the vocals. Long attack, right? But if you look in the core, in the root of the situation, you definitely can see short attack works the best for the vocals. Again, attack is far from everything, right? We have much more important parameters actually in compressors. Most important parameter, which is release, which is controlling so-called residual compression, the term I invented 10 years ago. And a lot of people started using this term after that. And actually it's really cool. We're gonna have absolutely mind-blowing video on release and residual compression. As always, I'm gonna demonstrate 10-15% of it for free, but I really recommend you to check these full lessons. It will blow your mind. All classic vocal compressors have a short attack. The Beatles vocals, Fairchild compressor, less than 1 millisecond. Did you know that Fairchild compressor was invented by a guy from the Soviet Union who was actually an audio engineer at Nuremberg trials against Nazis? It's unbelievable. Then 1176s, less than 1 millisecond. LA to A, 10 milliseconds only, not too long attack, but still 2 long releases, 2 stages release, and compressor never stops on LA to A, which means every next note still has some amount of compression. So this 10 milliseconds attack actually not as relevant. LA3A, transistor version of LA to A, already don't have this medium attack. It's already too short, really. So what we're talking about is not even arguable. To even out notes, you need to apply a relatively short attack. Sometimes you feel like the beginning of a note like maybe too over-processed by your compressor. Then you can increase attack a little bit. Sometimes even from 0.5 to 2 milliseconds create gigantic difference. 2 milliseconds attack can open up the transients at least a little bit, so it will not be felt like you over-squash the beginning of each note. On 1176 compressor, the shortest attack is 0.0, let's say something. The longest is 0.8 milliseconds. Sometimes when you change, let's say from this to this, it's just gigantic difference. You can open up the transients like crazy with 0.8. The reason, by the way, why? Because it's a very specific and unique curve of attack on 1176s. We're gonna talk about this in full lessons as well. Second reason to apply short attack is to boost the tails or to prolong the tails. Tails is literally like sustain. Just imagine how cool it is. It's just crazy how effectively it works. For example, you have a drum, high frequency fluctuations, then the main tail. You use short attack, you use maybe short release as well, so you mostly compress the beginning of a note. And everything what is in the end of a note start to be more dominant, more prominent. You normalize volume and the tail becomes more noticeable. Same example here, Fender Stratocaster, right? Let's say this guitar is known for the lack of sustain in the clean mode. You play clean, you strum a chord, and not like on Les Paul where it sounds like chord. It sounds more like chord, chord, like punch and disappear in tail. You want more tail? This is the trick. In the tail of your drum, there can be, let's say, ambience of amazing studio room. You throw a plugin, reverb plugin, to make more ambience for your drums. But actually this ambience can be inside of your drum channels, which you recorded in amazing studio like Abbey Road or Ocean Way. And then you just use compressor with a short attack and short release and your drums sound much more ambient. And it may sound much better than the reverb plugin, because reverb plugin can make your mix more muddy, overwhelmed, too many pieces, too many information, everything sounds washed out. It's crazy. You wouldn't believe how crazy it sounds if you implement it right. What I mean by prolonging the tail? You should understand any note has a spike and then some fade out. The problem is once you listen to it in solo, it's audible. But in the mix, where you have many instruments, there is so-called audibility threshold. Let's say it's over here. Everything is louder than this red line will be audible for your ear. And everything below this red line already drowning in the mix. You don't hear this part of this instrument. Your instrument seems like have long notes and you want these long notes. But instead, your bass guitar, for example, or bass synthesizer, just somehow sounds like nice and then somehow like whole, like you almost don't hear it anymore. Because of its drowning in the mix. What you do, you apply short attack compression, which eventually you may even use long release time, by the way, it depends. You really aggressively start compressing from the beginning, but you don't release too quickly, so you keep some medium release or something. You start compressing the very first peak very a lot, because it's much higher than the threshold and the attack is the shortest. Compressor started. Then next peak, as it's not as loud, and release still going, you don't set up too short release, it will be compressed also a lot, but maybe just a bit less. Next peak will be compressed also a lot, but just a bit less. Next peak will be compressed medium, and a couple of next peaks also will be compressed medium. And eventually, in the tail, peaks already will be below the threshold. It can be soft knee compressor, compression still going on, release maybe still applicable. So it's still some compression going on to the next peaks, but they will be compressed much less. Now note is quiet, you normalize it, and now you have much more prominent peaks in the tail of this instrument and not as crazy dominant peaks in the beginning. So audiobility threshold in your mix is like this. And now you hear not only this part which you heard before, but you now hear almost till the very last peak this bass note all the time audible. So instead of like it will be like holding its sustain. Audible in the mix. Also to smooth out a harsh instrument. Nowadays a lot of people don't know anything about harshness. I'm gonna keep this secret why and how to fix it for the guys who buy full lessons. Now for absolute beginners I'm absolutely against this piece, but just if you complete beginner and you completely don't understand anything what to do, this is settings for beginners, but again, it's not reload engineering. Reload engineering is not when somebody gives you a trick or a preset. Reload engineering is when you listen to the instrument and then you apply only settings which this instrument really requires. That's why you need all these guidelines instead of just some famous audio engineer who gonna share with you some project and some settings which may be suitable to some particular situations but absolutely not useful for your situation, for your projects. And you're still gonna be blind and beginning for the next 20 years, watching like somebody else, mixing some projects, not understanding what the reasons and causes and what they really hear and not having their experience of understanding all this, This is the biggest mistake what people make. What you really need to understand, you need to understand deep principles and fundamentals. You should have intuition and you should learn how to make your own decision on each instrument. This is exactly what I teach. Next class will be even more important because we're gonna be talking about the most crazy topic called release. If your release is 300 milliseconds, it doesn't mean your compressor stops compressing your instrument in 300 milliseconds. It's not. There is residual compression, curve of releases, how peak affects the next peak and stuff like this. I'm gonna explain all these things, including guides, how to buy full lessons, and how the system works. Read the description or the first pinned comment. You perform like «Темная ночь, только пули свистят по степи». You go like